G'day everyone, little bit late again this week because I have been away back in Sydney again as I was last week, but better late than never, and even better than also not being never, I think that was right. I'm going to make this relatively short. No blog post this week because of travel and things like that, but there are a few things I think were quite interesting during the week that are worth a bit of a chat about. Man, this is what happens when I do it on a Saturday. So, first things first, I was away in Sydney, as I mentioned. I was doing a private workshop there for an organisation that was sort of the usual sort of 2-day hack yourself first thing, which was good fun. 20 odd people in the room, same old SQL injection, cross-site scripting, bunch of stuff on CSPs, all this sort of thing. One of the interesting things I'm finding with these workshops is the HTTPS module in particular is just starting to massively blow out. And one of the reasons for this is that so much stuff has changed since I started doing these events 4 years ago. So, you think back through the chronology. Start of 2017, browsers started indicating pages which were served over HTTP that had passwords or credit card fields as not secure. Then they went along and started doing the same thing on import boxes not secure. Then anything not secure, or anything served over HTTP not secure. Interesting in terms of how much the rate of growth has, well, actually the rate of growth is really sustained, but as a result, the adoption of HTTPS both in terms of individual sites and the amount of traffic has massively gone up. Just all sorts of really interesting things that sort of ends up spending a lot of time talking to people. Some curious facts as well. Some of you might be interested in this. The things that I find people in these workshops have not seen before. And when I say these workshops, this is not just this week. So the common things that have really rarely been seen by developers, or at least sort of single-digit percentage of the audiences that I speak to, are things like HSTS, HTTP Strict Transport Security, making sure that you cannot accidentally make an HTTP request to a domain. Content security policies, very rarely seen. Sub-resource integrity, very rarely seen. DNSCAA, very rarely seen. That's Certificate Authority Authorization, in case you weren't familiar with it. Google it, it's really cool. So I find it interesting that there's all these sort of security defenses. And to be fair, this is not like stopping SQL injection. It's not at that level. But all these things that you have available to you for free, and they work really well, and they're supported in every browser, at least every one that matters. And people haven't seen this. It's like, guys, it's like you don't have to spend money with the security vendor to get this stuff. Like, go and do this. It's awesome. So anyway, that was the workshop. I did that. Now, what else did I do this week? Actually, other things coming up this week, in the next week. So I'm going to be doing a talk in Brisbane on Thursday, the 28th of Feb. So that's going to be this Thursday coming. That's going to be a talk in conjunction with NDC because I'm doing a lot of the NDC events. And we're going to be doing that in Brisbane. I'm going to put the registration link on my blog. I have a feeling we're very, very close to capacity, if not over. So if you can register, go along and do that. Now, because there's so much interest in that, we're also going to do one in Melbourne next month. And the date for that is Tuesday, the 12th of March. So I asked a bunch of people online. Someone said, can you do one in Melbourne? And I quote tweeted and went, hey, does anyone want to do one in Melbourne? And there was just a huge amount of interest. And I know that is already into triple digits in terms of how many people have registered that. And we announced it a couple of days ago. So if you want to come to Melbourne, go and get yourself on board that one. Both of these events are going to be sort of a combination of stuff around how have I been pwned on Azure and how I use serverless and functions and Cloudflare and stuff, as well as a combination of data breaches and traders and all this sort of thing, and basically other sort of inside mechanics of have I been pwned and InfoSec in general. And these user groups are meant to be really, really informal. All going well, I'll be drinking beer as I do the user group. And they're sort of made for people to ask random questions, and I'll show random stuff. They're usually not recorded, so it'll be super, super casual in that regard. So these are going to be really, really fun events. And I actually really enjoy doing these. So yeah, if you can come along, that would be awesome. So there are those two events. In preparation for these events, I ordered 10,000 more Have I Been Pwned stickers today because there's just been a heap of people lapping up Have I Been Pwned stickers every time I go to conferences. And I have been buying these stickers mostly with the credits that I get every time someone goes and buys Have I Been Pwned stickers from Sticker Mule via the referral code. Now, I say mostly because it turns out 10,000 stickers from Sticker Mule cost like $1,400 or something like that. So the credits didn't quite go all the way, but if you do go and order yourself or your user groups or your mates or whatever, if you stick it all over your partner's car, fantastic, good on you, send me a photo of that. If you do that, then I get some credit to go and buy more and give them away to people at conferences. So I'm going to give you another link back to that. All right, so that's sort of the intro slightly fluffy stuff. On to a couple of more tangible things. And the first one I really wanted to touch on, and I've sort of been thinking about how do I reply to this online without sounding like I'm pandering to password managers. Now, here's the story. There was a research piece put out earlier in the week from an organization that said, look, we've analyzed a whole heap of password managers and we found that passwords are retained in memory. So things like the master password is retained in memory. If there's malicious software running on the host machine and it can grab that from memory, that's not very good. And they're right, that would not be very good. Now, the thing is, this got a lot of news headlines. And I did get a little bit of an advanced look at this before it went out. And I could sort of see at the time, it's like, oh, this, regardless of the severity of the issue, and this is what we're going to come back to, this is going to be in the news. And it gets headlines because password managers are the things that we have the highest degree of expectation of security for. You know, it's like this is the thing that holds all your passwords. If someone gets into that and gets all your passwords, like, you are seriously, seriously screwed. And this is always the thing that concerns people about password managers. You know, if I put all my eggs in this one basket, could it all go wrong? So it's always going to get headlines, and in honesty, it should too. Like, every time there is any genuine security concern about a password manager, this should be big news, and we should hold them to a much higher regard. Now, incidentally, that holding to high regard is why there's a $100,000 bug bounty on 1Password if you can actually pop someone's account remotely. So, yeah, they're putting their money where their mouth is. Now, I got a heap of questions about this, and what I've generally done is referred people to a reply here from Jeffrey Goldberg from 1Password. His title is Chief Defender Against the Dark Arts, which admittedly is quite a cool title. And he's given a bit of a reply here, but I won't sort of paraphrase it. Actually, one thing I'll pick up from that, he did make a point. He said, basically, and let's sort of speak a bit more generally, a number of different password managers were named in this piece, including 1Password. And basically, the feedback from all of them is like, yeah, we know, everyone knows that if you have someone who's able to extract data from memory on the host machine that the password manager is running on, then bad stuff can happen. Like, this is old news. In fact, the point he made here is he said KeePass said correctly, called it old news. Now, I guess the broader issue we're looking at here is, what if the host machine is compromised? What if an attacker owns the host machine and is able to do things like read other data from memory related to programs and software, etc., which is, I guess, outside the sandbox of whatever this malicious process is running in? And the short answer is, well, yeah, you are kind of screwed. Now, whether it's your password manager or whether it's reading things from the DOM in your browser or whatever it may be, once you get to the point of host compromise, you're basically hosed. Now, of course, offsetting that, we've got more resilient hosts than ever. Windows 10, iOS, all of these things do a better job than ever before at being resilient to this sort of thing. If your host does get hosed, it's everything from screen loggers to keystroke loggers to everything else that can get into anything that you're entering into web forms, anything that you're typing from the keyboard, including your master password, and all sorts of other things. So in a way, it's kind of like, okay, the research deserved news because anything to do with password management and security deserves news. On the other hand, it's like we're not learning anything new here, and maybe what this illustrates more than anything is that the expectation that somehow password managers should be resilient to a complete host compromise is actually where the problem is. You know, that the problem is not with the password managers, the problem is with the expectation that they can be resilient to absolutely any form of attack. Now, of course, in a case like 1Password, and again, I was a little bit worried about how I put this because obviously I work with them with Have I Been Pwned, and I've used it myself for 8 years now, I think it is. In a case like that, the master password alone is never enough. You have to have the secret key, which is generated when you set it up. If you turn 2FA on, you have to have that as well. And if the position is, well, if something malicious is running on the host and then it gets access to the master password and the keychain, well, if you've got access to basically everything via the likes of the aforementioned techniques anyway, it's you know what I'm saying? So I think it was one of these things that got headlines, got overblown a bit, and a little bit of sanity needs to prevail. And so, look, some of the very smart InfoSec people that understand these sorts of attacks in a lot more detail than I pretty much said, if the host is hosed, you're hosed anyway, like back to business as usual. What concerns me with headlines like this, and I've seen some people make these comments, is people saying, this is why I won't use a password manager. It's like, all right, so basically you're going back to storing shitty passwords in your head, which is bad, and you're reusing them because that's all your head can do, unless you're Rain Man, as I've discussed before. And you're going to do that because you're worried about if your entire machine gets hosed by someone and they can do absolutely anything, then one of the things they can do is access your passwords. It's kind of a nonsensical argument. I'm going to link to it, but I keep coming back to an article I wrote a couple of years ago, and LastPass was the target of one of these stories. And that the title of it was that password managers don't have to be perfect, they just have to be better than not having one. And the position I'm trying to, I guess, espouse there is that I worry greatly when someone looks at security and says, this thing over here isn't good enough because it's not 100% perfect. The discussion we need to be having is there are these multiple things. They have strengths and weaknesses. And on balance, which is the best thing to do? And the best thing to do is not storing your passwords in your head. It is using a dedicated password manager. But look, some people are always going to hold that position, and it's the internet, so they're going to want to argue, so be it. I'm going to link through to Jeffrey Goldberg's response. I'm going to link through to my piece earlier on as well about password managers not having to be perfect. And hey, look, frankly, if you're that paranoid about in-memory keystroke loggers, go and get one of those password books, like literally the ones you write your password in. And you can't complain that I get a commission from password managers or anything. And incidentally, I don't get any commission at all. It's a flat agreement. But you can't complain about that if I'm telling you to go down the bookstore and buy a book. So anyway, point is, make sure you're using strong, unique passwords, because otherwise we have all of these problems related to different things, like the next thing, which is all the new data breaches. Now, last week, and I'm going to pull some info up here as well. Last week when I did this video, I mentioned that there was a large new data breach going into Have I Been Pwned. That data breach was IEM. It's a weird, how do you spell this? E-Y-E-E-M. Anyway, it's a photography site, I think German origins. And they had 20 million accounts popped. And when I was talking about this last week, in fact, I mentioned that there were a bunch of different services which had been breached, and I mentioned two different stories. So this particular one, this story was Dubsmash 162 million, MyFitnessPal 151 million. That also went into Have I Been Pwned just yesterday morning, my time. MyHeritage 92 million. That also went into Have I Been Pwned this week. So I've put in like almost 250 million accounts in the last few days. A whole bunch of others, some of which I have and are still pending. I just need time to process. Share this 41 million, Hort Look 28 million, Animoto 25 million, like just crazy, crazy numbers. And it's just sort of interesting that we've got a large amount of data suddenly circulating now. And I've had questions from people where they've said things like, in the case of MyFitnessPal, hey, they were compromised in February last year. Why didn't you load the data? Well, because I didn't have the data. Like, this is why it almost feels like every time there's a data breach, in fact, it doesn't feel like this is actually what happens. Every time there's a breach, people pop up and said, when are you going to load it into Have I Been Pwned? And there is something let's not be derogatory, because I get that people don't understand this. But there's something that people don't understand, which is that having a data breach is one thing, the data being in my possession is another thing, and there's actually quite a few things that need to join up in between those two. Most predominantly, of course, is that someone, whoever took that breach, needs to start redistributing it. Now, sometimes redistribution of data breaches is done very privately, very closed circles, very often commercially incentivized. Other times, as is the case just here, it starts to happen in a more open fashion. So in this particular case, someone's gone onto Dream Market, so one of the few remaining drug marketplaces. Actually, I probably shouldn't say few remaining, because there's probably a heap I don't know about. Not a big drug marketplace guy. But obviously, a lot of things like Silk Road, Hansa Bay, Alpha Market, etc., have been shut down. Dream Market seems to be one of the dominant ones that's actually survived so far at the time of recording. They do all tend to end up in the same place eventually. So anyway, it's appeared on Dream Market. The stuff's being sold there. So obviously now there's a greater visibility to the fact that this data exists. And what's been interesting is just to sort of watch these organizations whose data is now being sold suddenly go, oh shit, like we didn't know about this, right? Like imagine what it would be like if it's your business and the first you know about this is either a reporter contacting you out of the blue or not actually getting that contact. And I'm sure in this case with the Register, they would have done their due diligence and actually asked for comments. But I'm equally certain there are other media outlets that don't do that, and they're just like, yeah, hey, so there's this data being sold on the dark market. And this is the first you hear about it, like in the media. So I'm very sympathetic to these organisations because they must be going, yeah, like this is just absolutely blindsided us. I guess the saving grace is that so far of the data that I've seen, I'm pretty sure all of it, and I'm just thinking about some of the newer ones I'm yet to load, pretty sure all of it has pretty much just been email addresses and passwords. But, you know, it's like password stored as SHA-1. So, you know, that's just about as good as useless. Actually, MyFitnessPal also had IP addresses. A little bit harder to do anything too valuable with IP addresses, and also had usernames as well. But look, these email addresses and passwords are just like, where is the bottom of the pit, right? Actually, I think the answer to that is there isn't one. It's just bottomless because there'll always be something else feeding the constant flow of data breaches anyway. So there's a heap of stuff out there. That's all circulating around. I will keep loading those into Have I Been Pwned. I do have people popping up who gradually get hold of this data. I don't know whether they have paid for it. I don't know whether they're the people that took it originally. I don't tend to ask these questions. The questions I ask is I just want to know if it's legitimate, how it came to be in their possession. How do they do it? Into their possession is less important for the purposes of Have I Been Pwned than the fact that it's actually real and it's out there and it's circulating and I need to let people know. Last thing on that, well, I think of it as well, that the numbers for Have I Been Pwned as just like getting staggeringly large. So when I loaded that 730, and this is really off the top of my head mathematics, 773 million record collection one credential stuffing list last month, I had to send about 750,000 email addresses for 773 million records. I had hundreds of thousands of people sign up to Have I Been Pwned after that. When I loaded MyFitnessPal yesterday, which has I think I actually found about 144 million unique email addresses, not 151 as reported, 144, maybe my regex is stricter, I don't know. 144 million, I had to send just under 500,000 emails. So, you know, I had to send 50% more when there were about 5 times as many records. So it's interesting, isn't it? It's just because of the number of people registered and the number of people doing domain searches and things, it's just getting astronomically big. So I've probably got some other serious thinking to do with that. Anyway, so that's where we are for data breaches at the moment. When I come to you next week and do this, you're possibly more on time this time, there will be some number of millions of more records in there. Incidentally as well, and I only even looked at this today, the total number of records in Have I Been Pwned is now over 6.7 billion. Now, by the time I finish processing all of these new breaches, this is going to get very, very close to 7 billion. Okay, so that's everything on the data breach side of things. That's everything pretty much full stop. The last thing, of course, is this week's sponsor, which is Twilio. Twilio, of course, bought Authy some time ago, and Authy is a really, really neat way of doing effectively soft token-based 2FA. So they've got a piece on my blog this week about getting off SMS to SMS-based 2FA and moving to Authy. If you have never implemented 2FA on your service and you're thinking about doing this, it is a lot easier than what you probably think. We run this on Report URI as well. We always make sure we have 2FA available to people who want to take it up, and we do push people to take it up as well. So go and check that out. I would love to see more 2FA on everything possible because let's face it, there's a lot of data breaches going around these days. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. I know this has been a little bit more of a short one. There will probably be some crazy, random, unexpected stuff happen between now and next week, and it might just go back to blowing out again. Thanks very much, guys.